Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of In Trouble with True Crime Sisters. We are all happy to see you today. Or maybe not see you, but you know what I mean. We are two sisters who work on this. One does the writing and the research, while the other one does the recording and the other stuff. Today we are going to Australia and Aberdeen. We want to warn you that this is a true crime episode, and there will be a violent episode containing domestic violence. There will be violence against children and men. It will also contain graphic description of skinning a human body and attempting to be accountable. You can either stay or you can leave, because we are starting now. You might already have guessed it. We are discussing Katherine Knight, the first ever woman to receive a life imprisonment without the option of parole in Australian history. Let's start at the beginning. Katherine was born into a very violent family, and we have a lot of more information on her than we normally have in any of these cases we do. Her mother, Barbara Rogan, was first married to Jack Rogan, and they had 4 sons. Barbara had an affair with Ken Knight, who was a friend of her husband, and then the marriage ended. Barbara and Ken moved, and when they left, 2 sons stayed with their father and 2 sons moved to live with Auntie. Jack sadly died in 1959, and the 2 sons then moved to her and Ken's house. Katherine was one of a pair of twins born on 24th of October in 1955. Barbara and Ken had 4 kids together, so it ended up being 6 kids in total living with them. Katherine and Joy remained close friends throughout their whole childhood. Ken Knight, Katherine's father, was a bit of a psycho and an alcoholic. He would rape Barbara up to about 10 times a day. And Barbara, she would be a bitch, like she always was, and she would go and tell her daughter all about it. She would also go on about how much she hated men. Barbara was a suck it up and get over type of person. And when Katherine once came to her for advice, this is more or less what she told her. Katherine was also sexually abused as a child until the age of 11. Several different family members would take advantage of her. This has been confirmed by other family members. But her father was not one of the rapists. There was also some shame over the family. Katherine's grandmother was an Indigenous woman who married an Irish man, and sadly there was still racism around. But Katherine, she was proud of her heritage. Like I mentioned, Katherine was close to her twin sister, Joy, but she was also close to her uncle. He committed suicide in 1969 when Katherine was only 9 years old. She even claimed that his ghost came to visit her sometimes. After his death, the family moved to Aberdeen. Katherine was a little bit of a mystery at a school. She did not excel at any subject, and by her schoolmates, she was said to be a loner and a bully. She would bully young children, and even once attacked a young boy with a weapon. She also had altercations with a teacher, and Katherine was hurt. It was said that the injury occurred when the teacher defended themselves. So, she does not sound like a model student, but she still received an award for her good behavior in school. But school, it was not for her. So she left at the age of 15 without being able to read or write. She got a job as a cutter at a clothing factory. She worked there for 12 months before she left and started working cutting up offal. Offal is a mixture of different animal meats, like patein. It's made from offal. She did such a great job. She was promoted to boning. And here she was given her own sets of butcher knives. She was so proud of her knives that she would hang them over her bed in case she needed them. This is a tradition she would continue until she was arrested. In 1973, she met her future husband, David Kellett. They worked at the same place and started going out. David Kellett was a heavy drinker. He started drinking to cope with the trauma of his best friend dying. and help saving children on the train tracks. He had a railway job in Coffs Harbour, and it was here he witnessed a tragic shunting accident that killed his best friend. Shunting could be a very dangerous job, as the person would have to go between the train carriages or walk on the train tracks. Then after this horrible accident, there was a school bus full of children that got stuck on the train track, and it would be hit by the train. 6 children died, and David was there to help the remaining children get out of the wreck. He went on to the down spiral, which is understandable considering what he went through, what he saw. But he lost his job and then got a job at the abattoir in Aberdeen. And this is where he meets Catherine's brother, who introduced them. At this point in time, she already had a reputation of threatening people who upsets her. And if her David got into a fight or altercation, she would back him up with her fists. She wanted to get married, so in 1974 they had a wedding. David was drunk for most of the day. When they arrived on a motorbike, Barbara took David aside and warned her son-in-law about her daughter. She said, "You better watch this one. She'll fucking kill you. Stir her up the wrong way or do the wrong thing and you're fucked. Don't even think of playing her up. She'll fucking kill you." Playing her up is a way of saying cheating. It did not take long before Katherine tried to kill her husband. On their wedding night, he only had sex with her 3 times, and then he fell asleep. She then tried to strangle him, and this was just the beginning of her violence against her husband. During her pregnancy, David came home late after a dart competition, and she had burned all his clothes and then hit him with a frying pan. He managed to flee the house and went to a neighbor and collapsed. He was then taken to a hospital and treated for a fractured skull. Under normal circumstances, the person who committed the horrible crime would be arrested and prosecuted, but Katherine promised to change and to talk David out of the pressing charges. And as you probably already have guessed, she did not change. As soon as they had their daughter, Melissa Ann, in 1976, David left her for another woman. He could no longer cope with the marriage and the abuse and moved to Queensland. This pushed Katherine over the edge, and she was seen violently pushing the pram with their daughter inside down the street. She was pushing and throwing the pram from side to side. Someone informed the authorities, and she was committed to St. Elmo's Hospital and was diagnosed with postnatal depression. She was treated over several weeks. She took 2-month-old Melissa Ann to the railway line and left her there for the train to kill her. She then went into a town and stole an axe, threatened to kill people. It was so lucky that a man called Old Ted was close to the railway tracks and found Melissa Ann just a few minutes before the train passed. She was committed to St. Elmo's again and signed herself out the next day. Just a little while after this incident, she cut a woman with her butcher knife and made her drive her to Queensland to kill her husband. The woman managed to escape when they stopped at a service station. She went to the service station to kill the mechanic who fixed David's car. Because he fixed David's car, she blamed him for letting David leave. But when the woman escaped and ran for help, she took a young boy as a hostage. But the boy got away when the police managed to disarm her with a broom. She was again committed to the hospital. This time, it was Morissette's psychiatric hospital. Maybe this is just me, but if I was committed after kidnapping and hurting a woman and then take a young boy as a hostage, I would lay low and pretended to now exist. But not Katherine. She told the nurse that her plan was to kill her husband and his new girlfriend. She also needed to kill the mechanic that fixes the car. David now made a smart and very brave step and moved his mother to Aberdeen to support Katherine. This was probably to make sure his daughter was safe and no more people would get hurt. She was released in August 1976 into the care of her mother-in-law and her husband. They moved into Ipswich, a little west of Brisbane. Here she got a job working at Dinmore's Meatworks. In 1980, they got another daughter, Natasha Meir, and the marriage must have been fairly stable, as there are no more reported incidents to note of. But in 1984, Katherine left David and moved back to her parents in Aberdeen. This must have been a relief for David, as well as a little sad. She took their daughters with her. She moved from her parents to a house in Muswell Brook. She got back her old job in the abattoir. A year later, she injured her back and went on disability. She got a house through the Housing Commission. In 1986, she met another David. His name is David Saunders. The 38-year-old David Saunders moved in with Katherine after a few months, but he still kept his old apartment. This would drive Katherine insane, and she would often start fights with Saunders about what he was going to do when she was not there. She would kick him out, and she would then take him back. So maybe it was a smart move to keep the old apartment, to show him how serious she was, and what would happen to him if he ever treated her wrongly. She killed his 2-month-old dingo puppy, and just to make sure he got the point, she hit him in the head with her trusted little friend, the frying pan. He still stayed with her, and she had her third daughter, Sarah. Since the family was growing, Saunders decided to put down a deposit on a house. Katherine then paid off the deposit with her workers' compensation. It came through in 1989. Ah boy, she was happy, owning her own house. She decorated it just the way she wanted. And let me tell you, it was not a very safe house, of 3 kids running around in it. The whole house was decorated with animal skin, animal skulls, horn, weapons like animal traps, pitchforks, and machetes. She also added rakes and leather jackets, even covered the ceiling. But it was not a happy relationship. And when she attacked Saunders with an iron, and then stabbed him in the stomach with a pair of scissors, he ran off to the apartment in Scone. He came back to Katherine and his daughter. She had cut up all his clothes. This was the last straw, and he took a longer leave from work and went to hiding. No one would tell him where he went. When he came back to check on his daughter, Sarah, he found out that she had gone to the police and reported him for abuse, and that she had gotten an apprehended violence order against him. So similar to a restraining order. And you might have started to think, what can she possibly do? Don't lose patience just yet. We're almost at her final crime and the arrest. But before we get there are a few more things just to go over. Like, in 1991, she met John Talesworth, a 43-year-old man who got her pregnant with her first son. They named him Eric. They were together for 3 years when she cheated on John with another John. She then left John for John Price. His full name is John Charles Thomas Price, and he was born April 1955. By the time he met Katherine, he had 3 sons with his ex-wife. His marriage ended in 1988, but it seemed they got one, as the youngest son lived with his mother and the 2 oldest lived with him. He was said to be a great guy and he was liked by everyone. But the time they got together, he had already heard of Katherine and her violent temper. But his kid liked her. And apart from the argument, life was great. He also had a good and sustainable job and a really good salary. But this was not an all rainbows and sunshine. When he didn't want to marry her, she went around the house, filmed all the pieces of scrap he had stolen from work. Now, stolen isn't really the right word for it, I would call it, as this was old worthless things that they had thrown out, but he just kept them. But the company was very unhappy and he lost his job of 17 years, and now he was furious and kicked her out. And rumor also circulated in town what she had done. But she must have done something amazing because Price took her back after just a few months. They restarted their relationship, but he would not let her move back in. This made the fight more frequent and he lost a lot of friends during this period. We now have arrived in February 2000, and after another vicious fight, she stabbed him in the chest and she was kicked out again. Price would no longer take the abuse, and on his way to work he stopped and got a restraining order against her. He was so scared that he also mentioned to his colleagues that if he did not arrive at work, she has killed him. So after work, he went home like normal and saw Katherine had organized a sleepover for the kids and she was not there. So he went over to the neighbors and spent some time there before going home to bed. During the day, Katherine had been busy filming all the kids while making stabbing comments. It was later noticed that this was a crude will made by her. She also went and bought some black lingerie before she went over to Price's house and made herself some dinner, watching some TV before showering and waking Price up to have sex. The next day, the neighbor noticed that his car was still in the driveway. His work also noticed that he was missing, so they sent someone over to check on him and see that everything was okay. The neighbors and the colleagues went and knocked the door. There was no answer. They checked around the house but suddenly noticed that there was a bloody fingerprint on the door. The police arrived shortly after they called and broke into the back door in the house. They found something shocking. The police would still struggle with it years later. On the floor, they found Prince's post body, and in the bedroom, they found an unconscious Katherine Knight. It looked like after they had sex that night, Katherine had attacked him in the bedroom. He had then fled the room. He tried to turn on the light, but he had continued throughout the living room and made a break for the door. He managed to make it just outside before she dragged him back inside, where he bled to death on the floor. Then, sometime during the night, she took his bank card to an ATM and withdrew $1,000. In total, he had been stabbed 37 times in the front and in the back. Then she went on to skin his entire body. She hung it up on a meat hook. From the ceiling, she butchered some of his body and cooked it with vegetables. The police found his head in a pot on the stove with the vegetables. The table had been set for the kids with the plates of meat and vegetables like potatoes, carrots, pumpkin. Beside the plate, there was a note left for his kids. One meal was also found in his garden. So it looked like Katherine had actually tried to eat some of Prince, but was not able and threw it out. After she had killed, skinned, and cooked some of his body, she posed it on the floor. He was placed with his arms around an empty bottle and his legs across. The police found a note she had written next to this picture. Before you read the note, please remember that she left school at the age of 15, not being able to read or write properly. Time got you back, Jonathan, for raping my daughter. You two beg for Ross, for Little John. Now play Little John Stick John Price. Beck is John's daughter, and Little John is his son. Katherine first tried to plead guilty to manslaughter, but it was rejected. and she was charged with murder in 2001. Her trial was postponed several times because of illness, but in October 2001, it started. There was so many horrific pictures to show that the jury was offered an option to be excused. 5 out of 60 took the offer. When Katherine heard some of the details of what she had done, she became hysterical, needed to be sedated. But after all the evidence was read out, she still was calm and she did not remember the night or anything that had happened that night. She took no responsibility at all. The judge sentenced her to life in prison. She was refused a non-parole period and he ordered her papers to be marked definitely not to be released. She is the first woman to receive this sentence in Australia. She tried to appeal her sentence, but it was rejected. During her police interview with Detective Sergeant Robert Walls, she was claiming to be a victim of domestic violence with several men throughout her life, but she never admitted guilt to the murder of John Price. He said in an interview that there was a moment when she was talking that he looked at her and just knew that everything she said was a lie. And she is still in prison, thank God. Let's hope she never gets released. Even if she never killed again, she has a violent anger and people will get hurt when she got angry enough. I thank you all for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this. And I hope I will see you in the next episode. Feel free to leave a comment, a like, or subscribe. Take care.